The wine glass shattered against the wall. My husband's blazer, his expensive, untouchable blazer, was soaked in red, and when I reached for it, he slammed me into the washing machine. His hands weren't just rough, they were desperate. Now I'm holding his burner phone, the screen glowing with a message. The transfer is complete. She suspects nothing. $10,000. Gone. And the man I married? He's not just a liar. He's a thief. Sarah Miller stood in her Greenwich kitchen, the air thick with the savory, herbal scent of rosemary chicken roasting in the oven. To anyone peering through the expansive bay windows, she was the picture of suburban success. A top-tier surgeon preparing a gourmet meal in a kitchen that smelled of expensive olive oil and fresh-cut thyme. But beneath the surface, Sarah's mind was not on the dinner. It was a clinical, cold space where numbers tumbled like stones in a dryer. She reached out and adjusted the salt cellar, moving it a fraction of an inch to the left until it aligned perfectly with the edge of the marble island. 2, 4, 6. The rhythm of the even numbers acted as a stabilizer against the rising tide of panic in her chest. Spread across the far end of the island, hidden behind a stack of glossy architectural magazines, were the printouts from her medical clinic's emergency fund. Sarah didn't just read data. She dissected it. Her eyes, a piercing surgical blue, scanned the columns of figures. $10,000. The discrepancy wasn't a rounding error or a delayed insurance reimbursement. It was a clean, jagged hole in the ledger, a hemorrhage that shouldn't exist. She tapped the glass of her watch, listening to the faint, mechanical tick. The clinic was her life's work, a sanctuary of order and healing. And now it was infected. The missing funds felt like a shadow on an X-ray. Something that didn't belong. Something that signaled a deeper, more malignant rot. The sound of the garage door rumbling open vibrated through the floorboards, a heavy, mechanical groan that made Sarah's breath hitch. She quickly slid the financial printouts into a drawer, her movements fluid and practiced. She began to count the floor tiles between the island and the sink. 10, 12, 14. Mark was home. She heard his footsteps, heavy, uneven, lacking their usual confident cadence. When he entered the kitchen, the smell of the outdoors and expensive cologne preceded him, but it was tainted by something sharp and metallic. Sweat. Mark Miller looked like a man who had been running through a storm. His charcoal suit, usually pressed to a razor's edge, was rumpled, and his silk tie hung loose. He didn't greet her with his customary practiced smile. Instead, he moved toward the mahogany dining table with a jagged, nervous energy that set Sarah's internal alarms screaming. He reached for a bottle of vintage Cabernet, his hand trembling so violently that the neck of the bottle clattered against the rim of a crystal glass. "Rough day at the firm?" Sarah asked, her voice a calm, controlled instrument. She watched him intensely, noting the way he avoided her gaze, his eyes darting toward the floor patterns. "Just a lot of moving parts, Sarah. Big merger, high stakes." Mark replied, his voice a rapid, breathless pitch. He straightened his tie once, twice, 3 times, the triple tug that always signaled a lie. As he tilted the bottle, his grip failed. The heavy glass slipped, and a torrent of deep red wine erupted across the white lace tablecloth and splattered upward, soaking into the fine wool of his blazer. It looked like a chest wound, dark and spreading. "Damn it," Mark hissed, his face contorting. "Don't move," Sarah commanded, her surgical instincts taking over. "The acid in the wine will set. Give me the jacket." She stepped forward, her hands reaching for the lapels. She intended to take the garment to the laundry room, to apply the cold water soak she knew would save the fabric. But as her fingers brushed the wool, Mark's entire demeanor shifted. The exhaustion vanished, replaced by a raw, predatory panic. He lunged at her, his fingers clamping around her wrists with a strength that made the bone groan. "I said I'll handle it," he roared, his voice echoing off the high ceilings. He shoved her back toward the mudroom, the narrow hallway that led to the garage. Sarah's heels skidded on the hardwood. He pinned her against the vibration of the washing machine, his face inches from hers. The smell of the wine was cloying now, like fermented blood. Sarah felt the cold metal of the machine's rim biting into her lower back. This wasn't the man she had married. This was a cornered animal. "Mark, you're hurting me," she whispered, her mind already calculating the physics of the struggle. She needed leverage. She needed a gap. "Just give me the jacket, Sarah. Stop being so damn clinical about everything." He reached for the blazer, but his movements were clumsy, hindered by his own rage. Sarah saw her opening. She reached down and grabbed the heavy plastic laundry basket sitting atop the dryer, heaped with damp towels. With a burst of strength born of years of lifting patience and holding steady under pressure, she slammed the basket into Mark's chest. The weight of the wet fabric caught him off balance. He stumbled back, his shoulder hitting a shelf of detergent bottles that came crashing down around him. As he fell, something small and dark ejected from the inner pocket of the stained blazer. It skittered across the linoleum floor, coming to rest near Sarah's feet. A phone. Not his sleek, company-issued smartphone, but a cheap, plastic burner phone with a cracked screen. Sarah didn't hesitate. She snatched the device from the floor and retreated into the kitchen, locking the mudroom door behind her. Her heart hammered against her ribs. 22, 24, 26. She leaned against the counter, her breath coming in ragged gasps. Through the door, she heard Mark pounding, his fists sounding like 1,000 fists on a door, a dull, rhythmic thudding. "Sarah, open this door. You don't know what you're doing." She ignored him, her focus entirely on the plastic device in her hand. The screen flickered to life, casting a sickly blue glow on her palm. There was no passcode. Mark had been too hurried, or perhaps too arrogant, to set one. A single notification blinked on the screen. A text message from a contact labeled, "The One Who Knows." Sarah's thumb hovered over the glass. She tapped the message. "The transfer is complete. $10,000 moved to the secondary account. She suspects nothing. Proceed to phase 2. The world tilted. The kitchen, with its perfect marble and rosemary-scented air, suddenly felt like a stage set about to collapse. The $10,000 from the clinic wasn't a banking error. It was a deliberate extraction. Mark hadn't just lied about his day. He had been harvesting her life's work. And he wasn't working alone. The One Who Knows. The name felt like a physical weight in her stomach. The doorbell rang, a bright, melodic chime that sliced through the tension of the house. Sarah froze. It was 7 p.m. Her sister Jennifer and their parents, Robert and Barbara, had arrived for the family dinner. "Sarah!" Mark's voice was lower now, a hissed threat from behind the locked door. "They're here. You want to make a scene? You want your mother to see you like this? Give me the phone and we can play this off. Just open the door." Sarah looked at the burner phone, then at the door. She felt a cold, surgical clarity settle over her. She couldn't fight him in the hallway with her parents watching. She needed time to see the whole map of this infection. She slid the burner phone into the deep pocket of her apron, smoothing the fabric until the bulge was invisible. She unlocked the door. Mark stood there, his face a mask of sweating fury, his hand already moving to his throat to tug at his tie. 1, 2, 3. "We have guests," Sarah said, her voice like ice. "Go change your shirt. I'll get the door." She walked past him, her body rigid, counting the steps to the foyer. 2, 4, 6, 8. She opened the front door to the crisp Connecticut evening. Jennifer stood there, wearing a soft, beige sweater, her hair tucked neatly behind her ears. Behind her stood Robert, his eyes already tracing the patterns of the crown molding, and Barbara, clutching her purse like a shield. "Happy anniversary, you two," Jennifer chirped, stepping inside and enveloping Sarah in a hug that smelled of vanilla and deception. "Thank you, Jen," Sarah murmured, her eyes meeting Mark's as he descended the stairs in a fresh white shirt. The perfect husband once more. The dinner was a masterclass in atmospheric pressure. They sat in the dining room, the crystal glasses clinking, the smell of the rosemary chicken now competing with the scent of Barbara's heavy floral perfume. Sarah sat at the head of the table, her hand resting on the pocket of her apron, feeling the sharp corner of the burner phone. A new problem manifested. A low battery chirp emanated from her pocket. It was faint, a tiny electronic bird cry, but to Sarah, it sounded like a siren. She glanced at the screen under the table. 5%. The device was dying, and with it, the only evidence of the one who knows. She had less than 30 minutes before the link to the truth went dark. "Is something wrong with the chicken, Sarah?" Barbara asked, her voice tight with the forced politeness she used to paper over any family tension. She reached into her purse and pulled out a tattered grocery list, her pen scratching against the paper as she rewrote milk and eggs for the 100th time that week. "It's fine, Mother. Just a bit of a headache," Sarah replied. She needed to get to the garage. She had a charger there, plugged into the workbench where she kept her medical supplies. But Mark was watching her with a predatory intensity, his eyes never leaving her face. He knew she had the phone. He was waiting for her to break. "I forgot the dipping sauce in the garage fridge," Sarah said, standing up. "I'll be right back." "I'll get it, honey," Mark offered, his chair screeching against the hardwood. "No," Sarah said, her tone leaving no room for argument. "I know exactly where I put it. Stay and pour my father another drink." She walked toward the mudroom, her heart racing. As she passed through the small hallway, she noticed something that made her blood run cold. The back door, which she had locked after the struggle, was standing wide open. The cold autumn air swirled into the house, bringing the scent of damp leaves and rot. And there, on the floor of the mudroom, was her medical bag. It had been ripped open, her stethoscope and blood pressure cuffs scattered like discarded toys. Mark wasn't just waiting for her to break. He was hunting. She stepped into the garage, the heavy door clicking shut behind her. The space was cavernous, smelling of oil and cold concrete. She hurried toward the workbench, her fingers fumbling for the charging cable. The burner phone vibrated in her hand. 3%. Come on," she whispered, her voice a fractured thread. She reached for the cable, but a shadow detached itself from the darkness behind her SUV. A figure, clad in a dark hoodie and a faceless mask, lunged at her. Sarah didn't have time to scream. A large, heavy hand slammed over her mouth, pinning her head against the cold metal of the workbench. The intruder smelled of stale cigarettes and old paper. He didn't speak. He just reached for her apron pocket, his fingers clawing for the phone. Sarah felt a surge of raw, primal terror, but beneath it, the surgeon remained. She knew where the pressure points were. She knew how to hurt. Her hand swept across the workbench, her fingers closing around the cold, heavy neck of a portable oxygen tank. She didn't swing it like a club. She used the weight of it, driving the base of the tank into the intruder's ribs with a sickening crunch. The man let out a wheezing gasp, his grip loosening as the air was forced from his lungs. Sarah didn't wait to see if he would recover. She shoved him back, the tank clattering to the floor with a sound like a tolling bell, and bolted for the door. She scrambled back into the kitchen, slamming the heavy wooden door and throwing the bolt. Her breath came in ragged, burning gulps. Her parents and Jennifer were looking at her, their expressions ranging from confusion to mild annoyance. "Sarah, what was that noise?" Robert asked, his eyes darting across the ceiling tiles. 42, 44. Just... The tank fell, Sarah panted, her hand clutching her side. "I'm fine." She looked at Jennifer, who was calmly sipping her wine. Something about her sister's stillness felt wrong. Jennifer reached down to tuck a lock of hair behind her ear, and her designer handbag, perched on the chair next to her, tipped over. A sheaf of papers spilled out onto the rug. Sarah knelt to help her, her fingers brushing against a bank statement. She didn't mean to look, but the bold, black ink leapt off the page. Life insurance premium. Beneficiary, Jennifer Miller. The amount of the premium was exactly $10,000. The realization hit Sarah like a physical blow to the solar plexus. The money wasn't just being stolen to cover Mark's debts. It was an investment, a down payment on her own death. And Jennifer, the sister she had protected, the one who hummed "Happy Birthday" while she washed the blood of others off her hands, was the one holding the ledger. "Is this yours, Jen?" Sarah asked, her voice a low, dangerous hum. She held up the statement. Jennifer's face didn't change. She just smiled that soft, innocent smile and reached for the paper. "Oh, that's just some boring paperwork, Sarah. Don't worry your head about it." The air in the room grew heavy, oppressive. Mark stepped forward, his hand going to his throat. 1, 2, 3. He walked to the front door, then the back, and the audible click of the deadbolts echoed through the house like a gunshot. "It's getting dangerous out there," Mark said, his voice smooth as riverstone. "With that intruder you saw, I think it's best if we just stay inside. Lock the world out. For your safety, Sarah." Sarah looked around the room. Her father was lost in his count, his lips moving silently. Her mother was rewriting her list, her pen scratching a rhythmic, frantic beat. Her husband and sister stood like sentinels, blocking the exits. She was a prisoner in the house she had bought with the precision of her own hands. She felt the burner phone in her pocket. 1%. This was it. The final move. She knew the house's smart audio system was linked to every room. She had installed it herself, a way to play calming classical music while she studied for her board exams. If she could sync the phone, if she could just make the one who knows speak, she could break the spell of the family's denial. She retreated toward the kitchen island, her movements slow, deliberate. She tapped the screen of the burner phone one last time. The one who knows had sent a voice memo. Syncing. The screen read. Sarah's fingers flew across the control panel on the wall. She set the house volume to maximum. She could feel Mark's eyes on her, the heat of his suspicion. "What are you doing, Sarah?" he asked, stepping toward her. "I'm just setting the mood," she whispered. She hit play. Subverted. Sarah's heart felt like it was going to burst through her ribs. This was the masterstroke. In every medical thriller she'd read, in every cautionary tale of corporate greed, the recording was the silver bullet. She had the audio file queued, a voice memo from the one who knows, that would undoubtedly feature Mark's voice discussing the insurance payout or the clinic theft. She had meticulously routed the audio through the house's high-end speaker system. The sound would be inescapable, a booming confession that even her parents, in their deepest states of denial, would have to acknowledge. She felt a surge of cold, righteous triumph. She had outplayed them. Mark was a lawyer, but she was a surgeon. She knew how to cut out the rot. She watched Mark's face as she tapped the final command on the wall panel. He looked confused, then wary. Jennifer paused with her wine glass halfway to her lips. "Listen," Sarah commanded, her voice ringing with authority. "Listen to what your perfect husband has been planning." The speakers crackled, a burst of white noise that filled the room like a sudden storm. Sarah smiled. 1, 2. The relief began to wash over her. Once the truth was out, the police would come, the accounts would be frozen, and this nightmare would end. She could almost feel the weight of the burner phone leaving her life. The audio cleared. But it wasn't Mark's voice. It was Sarah's. "I just can't keep the numbers straight anymore." Her own voice boomed through the dining room, sounding fractured, hysterical, and high-pitched. "The 10,000, I think I hid it in the garden. Or maybe I burned it. I can't remember. The voices are so loud today, Mark. Help me." Sarah froze. Her hand stayed frozen on the wall panel. That isn't me," she whispered. "I never said that." "You're doing great, Sarah." The recorded version of Mark's voice replied, sounding like a saintly, patient martyr. "Just tell me where the clinic keys are. We'll find the money together." "I don't know," the recorded Sarah shrieked, followed by the sound of glass breaking, the exact sound of the wine decanter from earlier, but edited, distorted to sound like a violent outburst. Sarah lunged for the panel, her fingers frantically trying to kill the power. But the system didn't respond. The screen flashed. "Remote override active." She turned back to the room, her face pale. Mark wasn't cowering. He was standing with his arms crossed, a look of profound, weary sadness on his face. He looked at her parents, who were now staring at Sarah with genuine, soul-crushing horror. "I'm so sorry you had to hear that," Mark murmured to Robert and Barbara. "I've been trying to handle her episodes privately. I didn't want to ruin the anniversary." "That's a lie!" Sarah screamed, the sound of her own voice echoing the recorded hysteria. "He used a voice cloning app. He's been recording me for months and editing the clips. Mother, you have to believe me." But Barbara was shrinking back into her chair, her hands trembling as she clutched her grocery list. "Oh, Sarah, the doctors did say you were under so much stress. All those hours in the OR." Sarah realized with a sickening jolt that her smart move had been the final nail in her own coffin. By broadcasting the distorted audio, she hadn't exposed Mark. She had provided him with the perfect, public demonstration of her insanity. She hadn't just lost the evidence. She had turned herself into the evidence. Mark stepped forward, his hand reaching into his breast pocket. He didn't pull out a weapon. He pulled out a folded sheaf of legal documents, the blue backing of a court-filed paper gleaming under the chandelier. "I didn't want it to come to this," Mark said, his voice dripping with false empathy. "But after the attack in the garage, and now this, I've had to file for emergency guardianship. These are commitment papers, Sarah, signed by a judge 2 hours ago." You planned this," Sarah breathed, her world narrowing to the white edges of those papers. The intruder, the wine, the phone. It was all a setup to make me look violent. "We're going to get you help, honey," Jennifer said, her voice a soft, melodic hum. She reached into her handbag and pulled out a phone, the real phone she used to communicate with Mark. It began to ring. The caller ID read, "The one who knows." Jennifer answered it, her eyes locked on Sarah's. Yes, she's having another episode. Send the ambulance to the Greenwich address. High priority. She's armed and dangerous. The betrayal was a physical weight, a coldness that started in Sarah's marrow and spread outward. She looked at her father, but Robert wouldn't look back. He was staring at the floor, his lips moving in a frantic, silent tally. 46, 48, 50. He had reached the end of the room, and there was nowhere left for him to go. Subverted. Sarah felt the walls closing in. The commitment papers were on the table, a legal shroud waiting to be wrapped around her life. But she still had one card to play. She was a surgeon. She dealt in the physical, the undeniable. She knew that Mark's entire narrative relied on her being unstable. If she could show them the bank statement from Jennifer's bag, the one with the life insurance policy, the logic of their concern would crumble. She lunged for Jennifer's handbag, which was still sitting on the chair. "Look at this," Sarah cried, her fingers diving into the leather. "Look at the policy. They're planning to kill me for the payout. This isn't madness, it's a motive." She found the paper, her fingers gripping the crisp bond. She held it up before her father's eyes, her heart pounding with a renewed hope. This was the smoking gun. No judge would ignore a secret life insurance policy taken out by a sibling while the insane person was being committed. "Look, Dad. Read the names. Read the amount." Robert slowly reached for his glasses, his shaking hands fumbling with the frames. He took the paper from Sarah. She felt a wave of relief so intense it made her dizzy. Phase 1, the evidence. Phase 2, the realization. Robert's eyes scanned the document. "Sarah," he whispered, his voice cracking. "See?" Sarah said, her voice rising with triumph. "I told you, I'm not crazy." Robert looked up at her, and for a second, Sarah saw the protector she had always wanted him to be. He looked at the paper, then at Mark, then back at Sarah. He handed the paper to Barbara. "It's okay, Sarah," Robert said, his voice flat and dead. "We know." Sarah's smile faltered. "What do you mean, you know?" "We're the ones who suggested it," Barbara said, her voice cold and sharp as a scalpel. She didn't even look at the paper. She just kept rewriting her list. "The clinic is failing, Sarah. We know about the malpractice suit you've been hiding." "What malpractice suit? I've never been sued." "The one Mark told us about," Jennifer chimed in, stepping closer. "The one where you left the sponge inside that senator's wife? The one that's going to cost the family everything? The insurance policy. It isn't for us to get rich, Sarah. It's to save the family name when the settlements hit. We all agreed, even Dad." Sarah felt the floor liquefy beneath her. There was no malpractice suit. There was no senator's wife. But Mark had spent months, perhaps years, weaving a web of lies so intricate that even her own parents were willing to sacrifice her to save a reputation that wasn't even under threat. The evidence she had fought so hard to find wasn't her salvation. It was the proof of her own isolation. By bringing it up, she had only confirmed the financial delusions Mark had been feeding them. "The ambulance is 3 minutes away," Mark said, checking his watch. He reached into Sarah's own medical bag, which he had brought in from the mudroom. He pulled out a pre-filled syringe, a sedative she kept for extreme emergencies in the clinic. "No," Sarah whispered, backing away toward the dining table. "Mark, don't." "It's just to help you sleep, darling. You're so tired. All this counting, it must be exhausting." He stepped toward her, the needle gleaming under the crystal light of the chandelier. Jennifer moved to block the kitchen exit. Her parents stood by the window, watching the street for the flashing lights of the help they had summoned. Sarah's hand brushed against the dinner table. Her fingers closed around the handle of a steak knife, the cold steel a sharp contrast to the warm, suffocating air of the room. She looked at Mark. Really looked at him. She saw the fraud, the fear, the small man hiding behind the expensive suit and the triple-tug tie. "I'm not going anywhere," she said, her voice dropping to a low, clinical register. Mark laughed, a short, barking sound. "What are you going to do, Sarah? Stab me in front of your parents? Prove every word I've said about your violent break?" He lunged, the syringe aimed for her neck. Sarah didn't stab him. She didn't swing wildly. She moved with the economy of a woman who had spent 10,000 hours in a theater of bone and blood. She stepped inside his guard, her left hand catching his wrist and twisting it upward. With her right hand, she didn't use the blade of the knife. She used the heavy, silver pommel. She struck the precise point of the ulnar nerve in his forearm, the funny bone, but delivered with the force of a hammer. Mark's arm went dead instantly. The syringe dropped from his nerveless fingers, shattering on the hardwood. He let out a strangled cry, clutching his arm as he collapsed to his knees. "Sarah!" Barbara shrieked. "Stop it! You're killing him!" "I'm saving myself," Sarah said. She didn't run. She walked to the wall panel, her fingers moving with a new, calm certainty. She didn't try to stop the recording this time. She accessed the house's internal security logs, the ones Mark had forgotten she'd upgraded last month. "You like recordings, Mark? Let's look at the one from 20 minutes ago, in the garage." She swiped the screen. The large monitors in the living room and the small screen on the kitchen wall flickered to life. It was a grainy, night vision feed from the garage rafters. It showed Mark standing over the intruder, the man in the hoodie. "Is she dead?" Mark's voice on the video was clear, devoid of the saintly tone he used for the parents. "No, she hit me with a tank." The intruder groaned, pulling back his hood to reveal the face of Mark's junior associate from the law firm. "I'm out, Mark. This is too much." "You're not out until I have that phone." Mark snarled on the screen, kicking the man in the ribs. "If she gets that audio to the accountant, we're both going to prison for the embezzlement. Do you understand? I don't care if you have to break her neck, just get the device." The silence that followed in the dining room was absolute. Even the sound of the wind outside seemed to die away. Robert stopped counting. Barbara's pen froze over the word flower. Sarah turned to her parents. "The accountant, Thomas Wilson, has been trying to call me for weeks." Mark was intercepting the messages. The malpractice suit was the cover for the money he was funneling to his firm's failing partners. "He didn't just steal from me, he stole from you too, Dad. Check your retirement accounts." Robert's face went from pale to a sickly, ashen gray. He pulled his phone from his pocket, his fingers trembling as he logged into his portal. A moment later, a sound escaped him, a low animal moan of grief. It's all gone," Robert whispered. "Everything." Jennifer tried to edge toward the door, her face a mask of crumbling innocence. I didn't know about that part. Mark said it was just a loan." "You hummed while he drowned us, Jen," Sarah said, her voice devoid of emotion. "You can explain what you knew to the police." The distant wail of sirens grew louder, the blue and red lights beginning to pulse against the pristine white fences of the Greenwich Street. "But it wasn't the ambulance," Mark had called. Sarah had used the smart home's emergency silent alarm feature, the one linked to the local police precinct. The moment she'd entered the kitchen, the police didn't knock. They moved with a tactical, heavy efficiency, their boots thudding on the porch. "In here," Robert shouted, his voice finally finding its strength. "In here. He's a thief. He's a monster. Sarah stood in the center of the wreckage. The rosemary chicken was cold on the platter. The wine was a permanent stain on the lace. The commitment papers were scattered like autumn leaves. She watched as the officers hauled Mark to his feet, his dead arm hanging limp at his side. They led Jennifer away too, her soft beige sweater looking absurdly out of place against the steel of the handcuffs. Her parents moved toward her, their arms outstretched, their faces etched with a sudden, desperate need for forgiveness. "Sarah, honey, we didn't know. We were just so afraid," Barbara began, her hand reaching for Sarah's shoulder. Sarah stepped back. She didn't feel anger. She didn't feel relief. She felt a profound, echoing emptiness. She looked at the house, the reflective gold handles, the 3-inch grass, the perfect crown molding. It was a beautiful, expensive cage, and she had been the one who polished the bars. "Don't," Sarah said, the word a simple, sharp boundary. She walked to the dining table and picked up her wedding ring. It was a perfect circle of platinum and diamonds, a mathematical symbol of eternity that had turned out to be a 0. She set it down on the wine-stained cloth right next to the forged commitment papers. She picked up her car keys, the real ones, which she'd found hidden in the back of the silverware drawer. "Where are you going?" Robert asked, his voice small and broken. Sarah didn't answer. She didn't count the steps as she walked to the door. She didn't check to see if the second hand on her watch was still moving. She walked out into the cool Connecticut night, the air smelling of wood smoke and freedom. As she pulled out of the driveway, she didn't look back at the glowing windows of the Greenwich house. She didn't think about the clinic or the money, or the years she had spent trying to solve an equation that had no solution. For the first time in 38 years, Sarah Miller wasn't counting. She was just breathing. And as the lights of the city began to swallow the darkness of the forest, she realized that the only number that mattered was 1. Her. She was 1. And for now, that was exactly enough.